Welcome back to Voice Global. I'm your host, Pete Erickson, and I hope you've enjoyed all the chats and talks that we've had at Voice Global. There's just such a nice variety of leaders and influencers that are doing so many different things across the voice tech landscape and industries. Our next guest is actually doing something unique from all the other talks that we've had here at Voice Global, and that is they are doing voice locally on devices where there's no callback to the cloud. We're going to get more into that. He has a deep history in voice technology. Welcome to the stage, the CEO and founder of Keen Research, Ognjen Todic. Ogi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Pete. Thank you for the introduction.
Sure, I think that, yeah, go ahead, please.
No, all good.
Good. Okay, well, listen, I think my first question is really about you, and that is that, how did you find yourself coming into this space, and when did you first start to get interested and see the opportunity to solve some of the challenges that we're going to talk about?
Sure. So maybe you kind of alluded to what we're doing. Let me just quickly kind of go from where we are now, and then I'll go all the way back. So at Keen Research, we develop SDKs for on-device speech recognition on mobile devices and custom hardware devices. So we've been doing this for almost 5 years now. And our SDK runs on iOS, Android, and Linux devices. We have a number of customers and power a number of mobile apps and custom hardware devices in EdTech, enterprise gaming, etc. So in terms of my background, it goes pretty far. You can see I have a lot of gray hair, but in the past, about 25 years ago, I started at a startup called Ordnet Corporation that developed the first automated spoken language assessment platform. So what we did was we had an English-speaking test that was delivered over the phone and then scored automatically on the back end. And so I worked on the speech recognition and scoring piece initially, then I managed the engineering team at this company. Ordnet was acquired by Pearson, and I believe a lot of what we built back then is still powers their automated speaking tests right now. Wow. So anyway, we were doing a lot of speech recognition, a lot of neural networks, all the stuff that kind of popped back up maybe 10 years ago back then. So it was kind of super cool to see all these things kind of come back also. After that, I ran a software consulting business for a while and spun off a music search company called Tunzi in 2006. And at Tunzi, we were also using speech recognition, and we were basically synchronizing lyrics and songs and creating this kind of rich metadata to power some immersive experiences. Tunzi didn't go very far, but we were acquired by Shazam. The technology was used by them for a while. So anyway, I've been in voice tech industry since the early days in a way. I mean, it goes far more back than 90s, but that's kind of the synopsis of my background.
Well, I think there's a theme here at Voice Global, and that is a lot of the folks that we've been talking to have been at this for many, many years, and they've been working to solve a number of different challenges, whether it's audio, music, voice recognition, speech synthesis. It seems that all of this expertise is sort of coming together and then re-emerging as being able to solve a number of different challenges. So let's talk about, one of the things that I think is so unique about what you're doing is the on-device voice recognition and interaction. And, there was another company that was doing this. They were acquired and by Sonos. And so I know that it's definitely a market area that deserves a lot of attention. But tell us a little bit about your approach, and tell us about, some of the kinds of devices that where we would find Keen Research technology.
Sure. So, just a little bit of background how this whole thing started. This was about 5 years ago. I was tinkering with some mobile apps for kids, and a friend of mine who at the time worked with Apple, but not on speech-related stuff. He was doing a lot of multiplication fact practice with his daughter, and he was wondering, how come? Why do I have to do this? It's kind of a repetitive task. Why isn't there an app that can do this? And so he asked me because he knew I had a background in speech recognition. So I started kind of playing with this, tinkering, created some prototypes, and I quickly realized there's no good solution for on-device speech recognition on mobile devices. I also knew that there was a lot of progress in speech recognition technology with deep neural networks. So I started kind of diving deeper into this. And one thing led to another, and there was very quickly, or maybe not very quickly, but I built basically an early beta that was very kind of rough around the edges, the early beta of the SDK, and started talking to people, and I started seeing enough interest to kind of keep working on this. So, but to answer your question more directly, why on device? When does it make sense? I think there's a lot of different reasons why on device makes a lot of sense. I think for a number of use cases. One is the speech data doesn't leave the device, so by design, the system is compliant with different legal frameworks for privacy. So think about COPPA, like Child Online Privacy Protection Act, HIPAA in health industry. So you don't have to, it's by design, it's compliant.
Right.
Also in enterprise settings, there's a lot of security concerns. So companies don't like sending any kind of data or speech data, having listening devices to a third party. So that's a big problem that I think is solved by on-device processing. The second one is it works offline, so you don't need internet connectivity, and that's kind of a no-brainer when we talk about on-device. But what we've been seeing actually is not just, hey, this works when there's no internet. There's lots of situations where you might have internet, but it's not reliable, for example.
Right.
So
right.
it might be Wi-Fi in a hospital or somewhere, or we've seen quite a few comments from our customers and prospects where they say, you know what, we can connect. Sometimes it's really hard to actually figure out that. Sometimes it's going to stop working, so we want to run it on device. The third is the system architecture that's much simpler. There's no dependency on the back end. There's no dependency on internet connectivity. You don't have to think about scaling. Like imagine you have millions of users, suddenly you need a back end that's going to address that,
Right.
and not just it needs to address the peaks. That's also another thing that's tricky with the usage. You might have, million users, but they all connect at the same time. That's a problem, right, for the back end.
Right.
So much simpler system architecture. Responsiveness is also an interesting factor. No network delays, can be very, very responsive. With on-device, it's easier to customize things also. The whole thing about cloud is sharing the resources in the cloud. And once you start kind of introducing a lot of customization options, then you lose on the sharing part. And some of that can be fixed
Right.
to a certain extent, but definitely, with our approach, our customer A is using the SDK in one way and customer B in totally different way. So it's customizable basically. And
Right.
then the last factor I would say is predictable pricing. So cloud services typically charged by usage. With us, it's different. And so there's no mismatch between the cost side and revenue side for our customers. They know exactly how much they will be paying for what they're getting.
Well, I tell you what, you certainly have me convinced. I mean, you rattled off so many different areas there where there's a benefit to, having automatic speech recognition on board of a device. So let's get into some use cases and talk about examples where the technology is being used, and would love to talk about that, and also just get your sense of where do you see the biggest growth in the automatic speech or onboard speech recognition technologies? Is it in gaming and toys? Is it in enterprise? Where you may have facilities that are for various reasons, security reasons, not connected to the network. So would love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on implementations and where do you see the growth?
Sure. So, I can tell you a little bit about where we see traction, and then, what where we think things might go. So we have a number of customers, for example, in EdTech. So that's one example. If you think about all those reasons why OnDevice makes sense, EdTech kind of checks out all of them. Privacy, system architecture, customization. So we have a lot of customers that use our SDK to, for example, help kids learn how to read, for language learning also. We have some kids games, PBS Kids, for example. So there's a lot of that's an interesting area. I think a lot of consumer apps could benefit from voice interface. And to give you an example, we have one of our customers is a digital metronome. They built their product is a digital metronome. It's called Hey Metronome. So metronome is this device that gives you the tempo for.
Sure, I'm a musician, music. So I know it well.
There you go. Check it out.
I need that metronome any chance I can get.
It's called Hey Metronome, and basically it's voice controlled. It's very narrow domain, right? So and it covers it really well. It's built by a musician and an audio expert, and so basically what the idea is, you're practicing an instrument. You don't want to put it down to change the tempo, right? So you can just say, hey, metronome, set the beat to 120, or hey, metronome, next song, if you have a playlist. Right. So there's a lot of interesting things. You can do this without voice, but it actually reduces the friction significantly if you use voice. So I think there's a lot of interesting examples like this in consumer apps, enterprise, like, we see traction in like field services, for example.
Sure.
Anywhere where hands-free is required, where always-on listening might be required. All those things, it makes a lot of sense to have voice interface, and it makes a lot of sense to have it on device.
Yeah, I tell you, I love that use case, and I definitely can tell you when I'm standing there with my guitar and I need to change the beats per minute on a song. It's or between songs. It's always you're fiddling with it. I would love to just tell my mix. Exactly. So that's definitely something I'm going to be downloading. So where do you see the industry? Where do you see the growth in terms of like which markets do you think are going to be show the fastest growth? Is it going to be in the consumer device space? Is it going to be in the EdTech space? Is it going to be in enterprise, or is it going to be kind of spread throughout?
Yeah, I think that's a hard question, and we're not making kind of making bets on specific verticals. We're trying to play more kind of a horizontal play, and we're also, one thing I didn't mention before, we're bootstrapped, so we grow this business organically, and so it's kind of like we build things up as we just based on our interactions with customers and where we see the need to focus on. So it's a little bit less, it's a little bit more tactical than strategic, but being bootstrapped, it kind of forces you to do it that way. There's kind of like mobile apps, right? There is Android and iOS. Then there's custom hardware. I think lots of interesting opportunities there. It's a little bit more complicated because building hardware is harder, right? And then building hardware with audio capabilities. Now you have to think about mics, maybe microphone arrays. There's companies that provide services and help people build this kind of stuff, but it's generally longer time. You can think about automotive, like the cars. A lot of cars, the speech recognition still doesn't work well, and a lot of fancy cars. It's like, why is that? So there's some lag in technology adoption in those places, but all those are like a no-brainer verticals, I think, and I think that we're gonna see a lot more growth there.
Yeah, I would imagine that. As processing power improves and speeds improve on devices, it's only gonna make sense a lot of times. And I think you mentioned a lot of key things. I think privacy is one that seems that a lot of folks would really appreciate. And even though I think privacy is being well addressed by the industry, I just think being able to remove those barriers is really important. How much do you think the privacy versus the the connectivity and lack of connectivity requirement, where would you put those two in terms of importance?
I think it's kind of use case by use case basis. Again, in the EdTech, a lot of we have some customers who basically told us explicitly, like, we don't even look at cloud solutions. We just don't want to deal with this.
Right.
And usually the bigger the company, that's the bigger argument for them. They just don't want to expose themselves to any kind of risks in that regards. I think, to be honest, I think there's kind of there's some use cases that can run only on device, right? Because let's say you don't have internet connectivity. Right. There's some use cases where it has to run in the cloud. Let's say it's I don't know, a watch or something that doesn't have CPU that's powerful enough. And this is still also debatable, but let's say you cannot run it on the device. You got to stream, or a cheap toy that has like a $2 hardware inside and you can't run it, so you're going to stream, right? But then there's a lot in between where it actually, you can do it either way, and it makes a lot of sense to do it on device for just taking into consideration all those arguments that I've mentioned before. So for some people it might be privacy, for some it might be, hey, I don't want to send the data to third party, even though I don't care about privacy, or the cost. I think the cost is a really big factor if you have either large number of users or if you have long listening sessions. You're tying up some resource on the back end, and that resource is sitting in your user's pocket, right? Or in their hands. So why tie up a resource in the back end? So anyway, I think it varies, and sometimes you need, some of our customers kind of need all of those, but often it's one or two, but it varies by use case.
Right, I'll bet it does. So how, so updating anything that's on device, how do you handle that if you're not connected to the cloud all the time? Can you connect when you need to make any updates locally?
Yeah, so a lot of this stuff is handled at the application level. So what our customers would do, basically what we provide is an SDK that's integrated into their, let's say, mobile app, and then some additional assets and models, basically. And models, for example, could be updated kind of in the background. When the app is running, you just say, hey, there's a new model, I'm going to download it and switch to using it. We periodically update the SDK and provide it, and in that case, you would have to rebuild the app and push it to your customers. But frankly, a lot of I think all of our customers, basically what they do is when we provide an update, they just push a new release of the app. So in the mobile app world, I think this concept of app updates has become so seamless that I don't think that's a concern. Now, obviously, in situations where there's no internet connectivity at all, that's kind of an edge case where you'd have to think about, how do you update that? Well, how did it get on the device in the first place? But generally speaking, it's not about not having internet at all. It's more like not having it often enough where you want the app to run. Right.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, I tell you what, it's certainly a compelling part of our industry, and certainly represents a huge growth, and that is being able to do more at the device layer. And I think as devices and processing power get more powerful, this is only going to increase. So good on Keen for recognizing this and being there. Tell us, how do people reach you? How do they find out more about what you're doing?
So our website has a lot of interesting examples. It's Keen Research, KEEN research.com. And we offer also a trial SDK. So that's been really interesting. Our anybody who's interested in our product can go on the website, download the trial SDK. It works for 15 minutes at a time. Then it'll crash the app, and then you can restart the app and start playing again.
Right.
So
Right.
very low friction, easy to experiment. A lot of our customers have basically found us, they tried it, and they're like, hey, let's talk. So
Right.
the website is the best starting point. My email is ogi at keenresearch.com. There's some email addresses on the website too, and we're happy to answer any questions, help with evaluation, and anything like that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. And we are going to be getting together in person this fall for Voice Summit, and we hope that you'll come and join us. And we're going to be in the DC area. We're working on all the final details now, but we're excited about that. And Ogi, would you come and hang out with us? And we would love to see more about what you're doing and have you join us.
Definitely, that would be exciting. I think everybody's looking forward to going back to in-person experiences.
Yeah, no, we all are. I think that we've managed to stay connected. And I think one thing that's unique about this industry is just how connected it is. And the people that are doing such great work out there, the Voice Lunch guys and Dr. Terry Fisher and Women in Voice and Brett Kinsella at VoiceBot. So many people are just doing such great work, keeping us all connected. And thank you so much for your willingness to share today, Ogi, and just be open about everything you're working on. Very exciting times, and we'll see you in the fall, I guess.
Sounds good. Thank you, Pete.
All right. Thanks for joining me. My guest has been Ogi. Of course, I didn't pull up. I didn't put down the card. Ognjen Todic. Sorry, Ogi. And then Maisie came in at the last minute there, so we're from home. Thank you, Ogi, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us at Voice Global. We'll see you on the next chat.